Ear itching. Many people are listening. Hello. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Where have you been? Welcome back to Reality and Balance anyway. So, we're here for another impromptu book reading from Alice Miller for your own good. This is the second. Uh, it's not a series, but this is the second book she's written about child rearing, and this one in particular talks about the chaotic nature of child rearing, right? That may continue on into where we are today, in the causes of today, and the whole collective mentality and treatment upon others, and how we treat our children, is where we're getting to here. This is called The Hidden Cruelty in Child Rearing, right? I already know the title here, but the subtitle is Hidden Cruelty in Child Rearing, okay? And the Roots of Violence. So, the hidden cruelty in child rearing and the roots of violence for your own good by Alice Miller. She's a psychologist. She's already transitioned by now. I believe she transitioned in the early 2000s. Anyway, so this is part three. All right. I think we'll just basically picked up where we left off. Um, we'll do a little slight more background, but just from a different chapter. And we'll get back into a little bit more of Adolf Hitler and the background of his family. Okay. So Alice Miller likes to study and she likes to talk about early childhood development in the infant stage. Okay. So, um, if y'all want to go like some really background information on this book, then I highly suggest that you listen to my last two lives where we talked about the disturbances that comes out in adulthood based on um, how we rear, how we even visualize and look upon our children plays a very big factor in either psychosis or having a form of balance, okay, in our adulthood. Those are all pressed on our guardianship and our environment. We are out of the womb, right? Our environment, our guardians, our situation has a major factor in our adulthood. So that is a really good standpoint from where we left off. She makes a lot of good points and highlighting some psychosis that can come about from our childhood. Okay, some disturbances that can come about stem from our childhood that we can see right now that can run rampant in our adult stages, right? Things that are unresolved. Hey, good morning. How are you, Mr. Cool Man? Are you staying cool? Are you in Alaska? Anyway, that name sounds familiar. So, the one point that she make and we continue to talk about though is like this infant stage. Even our gaze, when we look at our children in their infant stage, can lead us to either some form of psychosis or it can bring a form of balance in our adulthood year. Like she had a lot of different examples and instances where um, it was either between the mother or the father that would do the glaring, which is like redirecting the child to act properly. So they would give them a glare or, give them a negative glare. And just with those instances that may seem subtle, goes a long way into adulthood about feeling accepting yourself and some form of like real psychotic nature based upon how you're treated, how you're looked at by your guardians, right? Anyway, so let's talk a little bit more about that, y'all. Let's talk a little bit more about the early childhood stages and how it may lead to like psychosis in adulthood. All right. So, all observed behavior has its roots in early childhood, but the cause will not be detected as long as the adult's manipulation of the child's psychic and physical needs is interpreted as an essential technique of child rearing instead of as the cruelty it really is. Okay, she's loosely saying like a narcissistic behavior type of parent, right? A lot of times, children aren't aware of the mass manipulation formed, okay, to keep you in control by the parent, right? The little subtle ways or even the bigger ways that narcissistic behavior. I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, right? I'm just saying it's like a collaborate controlling, crazy ass person. And I mean, just a lot of control that goes into narcissists, right? So, and a child who is born in that force field in their environment, they don't know any better, right? They think this is love, okay? This manipulation, right? This coercion, right? From their parent. The child think it's love. They think it's some form of safety, some form of caring, the treatment, because this is the guardian, right? So this is what she's talking about. I'm gonna read it again. It says all observed behavior has its roots in early childhood, but the cause will not be detected as long as the adult's manipulation of the child's psychic and physical needs is interpreted as an essential technique of child rearing instead of as the cruelty it really is. Since most professionals themselves are not yet free from this mistaken belief, sometimes what is called therapy is only a continuation of early unintended cruelty. Since most professionals themselves are not yet free from this mistaken belief, okay, well, we just talk about the mass manipulation of the connection of needs and controlling the child, right? Some professionals aren't even aware of that behavior because it's unresolved within themselves, right? Um, some most professionals themselves are not yet free from this mistaken belief. Sometimes what is called therapy is only a continuation of early unintended cruelty. I'm sorry, I'm only reading that again because I know a few people in my family are going through therapy and it feels like they're in a loop because they talk about the same thing over and over that happened like 50, 60 years ago. Okay. It is not unheard of for a mother to give her year-old baby Valium so he will sleep soundly if she wants to go out in the evening. This may be necessary on occasion, but if Valium, what? This may be necessary on occasion to give your child Valium, but if Valium becomes the means of ensuring the child's sleep, a natural balance will be disturbed in the autonomous nervous system will be undermined at a very early age. We can imagine that when the parents return home late at night, they may want to play with the baby a while and may awaken it since they no longer need to worry about him waking up alone. The volume not only undermines the child's natural ability to fall asleep, but also interferes with the development of his perceptive faculties. At this early age, the child is not supposed to know that he has been left alone. It is not supposed to be afraid, and perhaps later the adult will be unable to perceive inner danger signals as a result. That's a whole fucking package right there. First of all, volume. Who have who had access to volume? The fuck? Who wanted to have access to volume? I'm just saying. I think for my demographic and my background, like volume, are you motherfucking kidding me? They like doctors only prescribe that to certain groups of people. For real, for real. Um, but even if so, my mom or my dad wouldn't have taken it anyway. Let a doctor try to give my mom or my dad anything for calming, they would have like cussed them out, honestly. So they're talking about giving value to a child. Not only does it like separate its normative faculties of how the body is supposed to naturally relax itself, right? It disturbs that, right? It fucks up the nervous system. I always butcher that word. I'm not gonna even say it right now. I'll say it again when I know it exactly. The autonomous, whatever, the nervous system. So it disturbs the auto nervous system, right? Of responses, right? Okay. Um, so what the fuck was the point of her mentioning this? Okay. So basically, ultimately, so obviously the parent has an issue. The parent thinks it's okay to give a child volume so the parent can go out and party. That's a major issue. So not only that's an issue, the child is experiencing this unnatural substance into its body, introduced into its body at a very early stage. Not only that, that it can mess up the child through its nervous system, right? The ability to respond, natural responses, okay, in its own natural way. But just think about when the child gets older, um, when the secret gets out that mommy and daddy gave me a volume so they can go out and have a fucking party and go chill. Imagine that, you know, the conceptualization of the child that mommy and daddy needed to give me a motherfucking drug, a volume for me to fall asleep, for me to be at home by myself, right? What's really important, going out and partying or leaving your child at home by itself as an infant, you know? Then, children starts to think like, what's really important, this drug, had going out and partying, or taking care of this very vulnerable individual. And then, the child has to make a choice right then and there if they're going to continue on with their parents' mistakes or they will learn from it, right? But getting back to the book, y'all, because she's talking about value, and I'm like, oh wow. Well, how can we take like something else that people have more access to, alcohol and marijuana? Same difference. You're still checking out though, right? To an extent, I think I can say that from experience with my parents from smoking. Yeah, they definitely checked out. They weren't fully there 100%. Okay, they weren't there 100%. They were there, but they weren't there, from smoking. They weren't truly alcoholics, but there were alcoholics in my family too. And believe me, they weren't there at motherfucking all. Okay. They were there physically in their body, but they weren't there at all. So, like, there's something that has to do with substances and drugs that we put before the well being of our child. Like, we really consider like these substances and drugs, right? As a way of calming and to deal with their child and to deal with their life. That's something that we have to consider, as an adult, like what's important, the substance or the child. What comes, the well being of the child. Is the child safe? Okay. Um, is the child happy? Does the child have tuition money put away, for rainy day? you know, those kind of things are like important versus, going out and giving your child a Valium or getting drunk while the child's in the other room, watching TV. You don't even know what the fuck they're really doing, honestly, or smoking weed and getting high when the child's at the house or in the house or within the house. And because like your full focus is on the child, and by reference, hold on, y'all, 1 second. My alarm. Hold on 1 second, y'all. Hold on 1 second, 1 second. My bad. We're going to get back to the book. Give me 30 seconds. Hold on. Whoops. Okay. Alrighty. Because I might be like foreseeing what she's talking about, or what she's leading to. Because why else would she be talking about value? Right? And we can only speculate other things. So if you don't have access to value, then there's a corner store everywhere. There's a 7-Eleven, there's a Plaid Pantry, there's a corner store that has alcohol. Okay. That has tobacco, that has cigarettes. Okay. There's dispensaries popping up everywhere like Starbucks, right? So no matter what that access is, it's taking away time and energy from the children, even if that the money that adults put into substances, and then the child be asked out basically, or even the child be wearing like name brand clothes and shoes and everything, but like what about their education, or what about some type of finances or whatever. Anyway, so let's get back to the book, y'all. So to prevent absurd self-destructive behavior from developing in adulthood, parents do not need extensive psychological training. They need only refrain from manipulating their child for their own needs, from abusing him by undermining his vegetative balance. Oh, I've never, okay. Vegetative balance. His vegetative balance. Interesting. I like how she used vegetative balance when it comes to children, right? And then the child will find the best defense against inappropriate demands in his own body. He will be familiar from the beginning with the language of his body and with his body signals. Wow, that sounds like one of my affirmations. I'm sorry. You have a question? Word up. Hey, so it says, I'm going to read this again, but quickly, all right? So they need only refrain from manipulating their child for their own needs. So that's exactly what we're talking about. So giving the child Valium so you can go out to party, smoking weed so you can just relax for a moment, drinking like a whole bunch of beer and alcohol so you can just relax and be happy and joyful, whatever. I don't know. All because of the life, that you built for yourself mainly. So he will be familiar from the beginning with the language of his body and with his body signals. If parents are also able to give their child the same respect and tolerance they had for their own parents, they will surely be providing him with the best possible foundation for his entire later life. His self esteem, as well as the freedom to develop his innate abilities, depend on this respect. If parents are also able to give their child the same respect and tolerance they had for their own parents, they will surely be providing him with the best possible foundation for his entire later life. His self esteem, as well as the freedom to develop his innate abilities, depend on this respect. Okay, as I have said, we do not need books about psychology in order to learn to respect our children. What we need is a revision of theories of child rearing. You see, Oh, you still didn't ask your question. You see how she highlighted how we need to respect our children, and you see how it's played the other way around in society. When I continue to say that we are raising adults, they might be children now, but we are raising adults that will grow up, God is willing, right, to be individuals. And the treatment that they receive in their earliest childhood development will follow them throughout their days in their life. Okay. The way we were treated as small children is the way we treat ourselves the rest of our life. Okay, that's exactly what I just said. And we often impose our most agonizing suffering upon ourselves. We can never escape the tormentor within ourselves, who is often disguised as a pedagogy, someone who takes full control in illness. For example, she's going to talk about anorexia. So let's move along, move along, move along, move along to Hitler here. Let's move along to Hitler. Um, yeah, here we go. I'm just going to talk about the background of like this German um, regime that I am so unfamiliar with. She mentions a few times. Okay. I think it's important because of the elitism that comes with these formations of regimes. You know, these flags, these plaques, and things like that. They were all underneath like forms of houses. So let's begin here. We're still talking about Hitler's father, Alois, Alois. Okay, right. So here we go. Since there were no bonds of affection between Adolf and his father, his burgeoning hatred was constant and unequivocal. There was no bonds of affection between Adolf Hitler and his father. All right. His hatred was constant and unequivocal. And they're quoting that from a biography by Mein Kemp, right? Who wrote that description between the relationship of Adolf Hitler and his father, Alois. It is different for children whose fathers have outbursts of rage and can then, in between times, play good naturally with their children. In this case, the child's hatred cannot be cultivated in such a pure form, right? Like petrol or something like that. These children experience difficulties of another sort as adults. They seek out partners with a personality structure that, like their fathers, tend towards extremes. They are bound to these partners by a thousand chains and cannot bring themselves to leave them, always living with the hope that the other person's good side will finally win out. Yet at every fresh outburst, they are plunged into new despair. These, oh my God, sadomasochistic, I'm sorry, I know that word, but I'm sorry. sadio machinistic. I'm sorry. I know that word. Somebody spell it out for me. Somebody do hook on phonics. I know that word. Okay. Anyway. Okay, Google. I'm gonna try to get this pronouncing right. Okay, Google. What is the definition of
Is there
sadio?
something you need help with?
What is yes? Okay, Google. What is the definition of sadomasochistic?
A
No. Okay,
machinist is a
Google.
skilled tradesperson or professional who operates various machines.
I have a word.
Is there something else I can help you with today?
Um,
The word you're asking about is sadomasochistic. Here's the pronunciation and definition. Pronunciation. There are a couple of common pronunciations. Sadomasochistic, more common in British English and often heard in American English. Sadomasochistic,
what?
also common in American English. The key is to stress the kiss syllable. Definition. Sadomasochistic, adjective, refers to or is characterized by sadomasochism. Sadomasochism is the derivation of pleasure, often of a sexual nature, from the infliction of physical or psychological pain on another person, sadism, or from experiencing such pain when.
Yeah. Okay. These sadomasochistic bonds, which go back to the equivocal and unpredictable nature of a parent, are stronger than a genuine love relationship. They are impossible to break and signal permanent destruction of the self. What? Uh-huh. Okay, let's go back a little bit. In the case of the child's hatred cannot be cultivated in such a pure form. These children experience difficulties of another sort. As adults, they seek out partners with a personality structure like their father's tends towards extremes. They are bound to these partners by a thousand chains and cannot bring themselves to leave them, always living with the hope that the other person's good side will finally win out. Yet at every fresh outburst, they are plunged into new despair. These sadomasochistic bonds, which go back to the equivocal and unpredictable nature of a parent, are stronger than a genuine love relationship. They are impossible to break and signal permanent destruction of the self. Permanent destruction of the self. Why did she use the word sadomasochistic bonds? Because that's saying nothing but a sexual tie in nature. Okay, we're almost done. We have a few minutes, y'all. Hope y'all are enjoying this read and learning some interesting things. So, what the author doing basically right now, she is just tying the acts of obviously some collective form of data. Okay, when fathers are abusive, when they're physically abusive. I think she's just describing physical abuse. Physical abuse. Now she did say sadomasochistic bonds. I mean, I don't know. He didn't mention sexual abuse, but because it did mention that Hitler's father did beat him. But let's continue on. So she's talking about the relationships we continue to build based on that instances of experience of having a household where you are beaten, you are attached to these beatings, you see that as a greater bond than a real actual love relationship, right? Now let's break it down like a real love relationship. You don't even have to look far. You can look at the relationship between yourself. Even if that, you can't even look at a relationship for yourself. You can look at a relationship from a cat and dog. So if you see of an animal, you beat an animal, that says a lot about the nature and the characterization of yourself as a person, right? You already hate yourself, so, okay, you reaching out to cat and dogs and animals. Okay, yeah. Okay, now you're extending out to other people, the human beings, right? Because of the formation of receiving so much abuse, okay, over and over again in their environment. And that's all that he saw. No matter how much money he had or how much less money he had, it was the physical abuse that was formed. Okay, that took place of love. So that's all the kind of relationships that individuals attract and are attracted to, that continue to stay in these kind of relationships because it is hereditary, it is genetic. Okay. um Sometimes it's not, but I think it really is hereditary and genetic, severely 100%. um okay, because I know a lot of women who obviously their mother were abused, their mothers were abused, their mothers were abused, but I can't say that for my mothers and my grandmothers at all. And I can only say that is because I actually was infatuated with one of those relationships in my much earlier years, but it was, I got away from it because it was like, okay, wait, something clicked in my mind. It's going to be me or it's going to be him, right? That's where I was getting to. Like, it wasn't, oh, I love him. So let's move on. It says little Adolf could be certain of receiving constant beatings. He knew that nothing he did will have any effect on the daily thrashings he was given. All he could do was deny the pain. In other words, deny himself and identify with the aggressor. Exactly what we were saying. No one could help him, not even his mother, for this would spell danger for her too, because she was also battered. This state of constant jeopardy is reflected very clearly. Here we go. Now we're getting ready to talk about regimes of Jewish and German, and let's let's just see. Let's just see if we want to before we flip the page. Okay. This state of constant jeopardy is reflected very clearly in the fate of the Jews in the Third Reich. I don't know what that means, but I guess I could ask Google. Let us try to imagine the following scene. A Jew is walking down the street, perhaps on his way home from buying milk, when a man wearing an SA armband attacks him. This man has the right to do anything to the Jew he wants, anything his fancy happens to dictate, and that his unconscious craves at the moment. The Jew can do nothing to alter this. He is in the same position as little Adolf once was. If the Jew tries to defend himself, there is nothing to prevent his being trampled to death. He is like the 11-year-old Adolf. Ooh, 11. Okay, 11. We start building memories about 8 years old, right? Conceptualizing when we can really start fighting for ourselves and standing up for ourselves is about 8 years old, right? So he's already surpassed that. He's 11. He's basically almost quote unquote preteen, whatever the fuck that is. Basically, it's just getting older. Um, um, experiencing just multiple different things going on within the body, hormonally mainly. You know what I'm saying? So he's 11, and his dad is giving him daily beatings at 11 years old. He is like the 11-year-old Adolf who, in desperation, once ran away from home with three friends, planning to float down the river on a homemade raft and thus flee from the violent father. I even wonder why so many kids be running away, right? Or used to, just for the very thought of trying to escape. He was nearly beaten to death. It is just as impossible for the Jew to escape. All roads are cut off and lead to death, just like the railroad tracks that simply came to an end at Treblinka and Auschwitz, signifying the end of life itself. Disgusting. This is the way any child feels who is beaten day in and day out and who is very nearly killed for daring to think of escape. Now, I know this is a little deep, y'all. It ain't a little deep. It is what it is. This is what happens every day. This is what's happening right now, right? The more that we are aware, the more that we can change. Okay. Hmm. So let's read a little bit more, see where she's going with this, and if she's going to talk a little bit more in specifics. Okay. In the scene I had just described, which occurred countless time between 1933 and 1945 in many variations, the Jew has to endure everything like a helpless child. He must submit to having this with excuse me creature with the SA armband who has been transformed into a screaming berserk monster, pour the milk over his head, and summon others to the scene to share his amusement. He must endure having the SA man feel big and strong alongside someone who is completely at his mercy, completely in his power. If this Jew loves his life, he will not risk it now just for the sake of proving himself that he is tough and courageous. Instead, he will remain passive, yet inwardly full of revulsion and scorn for this man, just as Adolf had been when he gradually came to see through his father's weakness and began to pay him back, at least a little boy, by doing poorly in school, which he knew upset his father. As we like talked about yesterday, his father was basically illegitimate. So I believe the author is still speculating is where some of his father, Adolf Hitler's father's anger came from, is being born unwed, and none of his he was you know the child, his dad's, whoever the hell, they didn't want to claim him. Basically, he was unclaimed. And that was never a good look because this was like in 1858 or whatever. So he was born out of wedlock for one. Okay, and then nobody was claiming him, period. So she may still be speculating this is where Hitler's father anger persists from. Okay. Um, I think we're going to skip a little bit more here, y'all, because that was it. That was all of my highlights, everybody. That was all of my highlights that we had. I didn't think I was going to get through it like less than an hour, but it definitely took less than an hour to get through all these little hot spots. Okay, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'm just going to jump back here a little bit and see if there's any more things interesting to get through. Okay, let's see. So, who is this fast person that she's talking about? That is so crazy. Okay, now I know why there was so much conversation about Adolf Hitler's dad, if he was Jewish or not. Let me just read this. It says such intolerable confusion about a child's family background can be the cause of learning problems in school. Because knowledge is forbidden and thus is threatening. In any case, Hitler later wanted to know from every citizen with great accuracy whether a Jew was hiding in the family tree back to the third generation. I forgot about that. I forgot about the extent that he wanted to know if there was Jewish in his family and like in families entirely. I forgot about going back in generations. Fucking so okay, now Miller is talking about an author. Hmm. When he was 11, Adolf was nearly beaten to death when he tried to free himself from an intolerable situation by running away. His brother Edmund did die around this time. Although we have no information about this, it may have been that Adolf had a certain amount of power over his weaker brother. In any event, it is during this period that he began to do poorly in school in contrast to the good grades he had earlier. Who knows, perhaps this bright and gifted child might have found a different, more humane way of dealing with his pent up hatred if his curiosity and vitality had been given more nourishment in school. But even an appreciation of intellectual values was made impossible for him by his early, deeply problematical relationship with his father, which was then transferred to his teachers in school. This child, who is subject to rages like those of his father, grows up to order the burning of books by free thinking authors. Where's my pen? The child who is subject to rage like those of his father. Now, some people might be triggered because that's all we're talking about is father, father, father. I know there's a lot of trigger people, but don't worry. We've already talked about the mother, and then plus on top of that, we're going to go back in a later time and talk about the mother again, right? But now, we're highlighting the father. Okay, so if you feel some certain kind of way, that is very weird. But thank y'all for being here and liking the stream. Okay, so there's so many different connections here. Okay, this is why we have patterns and connections when we're dealing with behaviors because there are many forms of patterns. Okay, when we're dealing with absurd psychosis, okay, behaviors, right? So this child who is subject to rages like those of his father grows up to order the burning of books by free thinkers, authors. Now, she wrote this a long time ago. This wasn't written recently. And when was this published, honey? 1986. Originally published in 1983. They are books that Hitler hated but had never read. Sounds familiar, right? They are books that Hitler hated but had never read. Perhaps he could have read and understand them if he had been allowed from the beginning to develop his potential. Oh no, I didn't want to do no highlight. Boo. The burning of books and the condemnation of artists are acts of revenge because this gifted child was prevented from enjoying school. Sounds familiar. Like somebody else who had like 4, 5 children and they all had to major in the same thing. Finance. You have no choice. I don't give a fuck about your skills, your talents. Y'all all going to school. Y'all all gonna major in economics and finance because I told you to. We school, you ain't supposed to explore yourself. You ain't supposed to be having fun. You supposed to go in there, get an education, and get in and get out. You ain't supposed to have fun. You come here to work. That sounds so familiar, right? The burning of books and the condemnation of artists are acts of revenge because his this gifted child was prevented from enjoying school. Perhaps this story will illustrate what I mean. She's telling a story. I just want to see if it's gonna be interesting enough. Nope, I don't want to read it. It probably is. I just don't want to. Let's see. I have dwelt so long on Hitler's problems at school because their causes and their later ramifications are typical of millions of other cases as well. The fact that Hitler had so many enthusiastic followers proves that they had a personality structure similar to his. Y'all think this is coincidence that I lost the book before that I was reading and this was given to me? Right. I have dwelt so long on Hitler's problems at school because their causes and their later ramifications are typical of millions of other cases as well. She ain't say thousands, she says millions. There's a the fact that Hitler had so many enthusiastic followers proves that they had a personality, personality structure similar to his. They had had a similar upbringing. We have a couple more minutes, you guys. Any questions? Any questions? Any questions? Feel free to ask. Thank y'all for liking the stream and hanging out. Okay, so both child abuse and its consequences are so well um, integrated into our lives that we are scarcely struck by their absurdity. Both child abuse and its consequences are so well integrated in our lives that we are scarcely struck by their absurdity. They just took me to missing children for some reason. Adolescent heroic willingness to fight one another in wars and to die for someone else's cause and die for someone else's cause may be a result of the fact that during puberty, the warded off hatred from early childhood becomes reinstated. Okay. I'm getting strangled. What the hell? Couple more minutes, y'all. We're just skipping through this insert about Adolf Hitler's father, Alois, Alois. Okay. So, since I believe that most of the biographies written about Hitler's father was probably in German, to find how it was transferred over to English will probably be, very slim. So I'm thinking that's why she has a lot of different examples and backgrounds. Okay, to compare the behavior of Adolf, all right, to like the speculations of his father, mainly, which a lot of psychology can do. People and writers in general, they can fill up some space now. They can fill up some space. And I feel like this is what she's doing with the father a lot. And I think I said that yesterday too. Last night when we did this reading, I feel like with the mother was a little bit more seamless follow through, a little bit more linear, more of a story for some reason, you know. But with the father, it's like so much rated of chaotic nature. Maybe it's designed that way for the book, because the father holds the name, right? He's the one that's the protector, right? He's the one who's supposed to provide and protect, right? But he has the name, right? So he has, you know, big shoes to fill, especially as an, I don't know how he became an elitist, right? You know, I'm not sure. Maybe he worked his way up, because his mom, um, Hitler's grandmother, was a servant. Um, but just because she was a servant doesn't mean that she was poor either. Mm. In comparison to other servants, okay? So, although or because most of the people surrounding Hitler had once been battered children themselves, no one grasped the connection between his panic and the unintelligible numbers. The feelings of fear he had repressed in his childhood when counting his father's blows now overtook the adult at the peak of his success in the form of nightmares, sudden and inescapable in the loneliness of the night. Had he made the entire world his victim, he still would not have been able to banish his introjected father from his bedroom, for one's own unconscious cannot be destroyed by destroying the world. Yet, in spite of this fact, the world would still have had to pay dearly if Hitler had lived any longer. For the springs of his hatred flowed unceasingly, even in his sleep. That's what we talked about yesterday. She said the streams of his hatred flows so seamlessly, even in his sleep. He dreams of hate. Hate, hate, hate. That's exactly the energy that I was picking up yesterday. The exact energy. Because if you can remember the quote, should we go back to the quote that she used, okay, in the beginning of the chapter, right? Even before the quote, already you can just feel when people have love going through their veins, okay, when people just just have regular shit going through their veins. But how often do you meet someone that has hatreds and vile and disgust in their entire system? They bleed fire red, they see fire red, they hatred, they hate everybody, everybody's despicable, that's not like them, like pure hatred, like pure disgust, like below, beneath, worth massacring, genociding, right? Y'all think Hitler's the only one who did genocide? Let's see. So here's the quote from Hitler. Oh shit! I probably lost the page we were before. Oh no, we got okay. We got it. It says my pedagogy is hard. I don't know why he said it was hard. Oh, right. Got it. What is weak must be hammered. Must be hammered away. What is weak must be hammered away. In my fortresses of the tectonic order, a young generation will grow up before which the world will tremble. I want the young to be violent and domineering, undismayed and cruel. The young must be all these things. They must be able to bear pain. There must be nothing weak or gentle about them. The free, splendid beasts of prey must once again flash from their eyes. They call human beings prey. Splendid beasts of prey. I want my young people strong and beautiful. That way I can create something new. And that's what she was talking about. If he didn't die at that particular time, he already had people that was fight. He had powers. He still has powers. I'm just only here to read the energy. Um, keep my pains out for now. Let's see. Anything else that like really stands out before we get to the mom? Because I think on the next reading we're gonna get to the mom. Like I said, like there's a lot of space filler in here because of the lack of language and the transferring of language of biographies when they're talking about Adolf Hitler's dad, right? Um, okay, that went right to the page we were at. Okay, listen, it says this. What didn't the son do to forget the trauma of the beatings his father gave him? He subjugated Germany's ruling class, won over the masses, and bent the governments of Europe to his will. Daniel, we're not going to say who all played the part. It wasn't only just Germany. It was only just Germany. Okay. He possessed nearly limitless power at night. However, in his sleep, when the unconscious let us know about our early childhood experiences, there was no escape. Then his father came back to frighten him, and his terror was boundless. Listen, so somebody, okay, wrote this about Hitler, and we're going to end it. It says Hitler, however, has states that approach persecution mania in a dual personality. It says Hitler, however, has states that approach persecution mania and dual personality. His sleeplessness is more than the mere result of excessive nervous strain. Always, no chill, always. Don't know how to chill. Nervous system fucked. He often wakes up in the middle of the night and wanders restlessly to and fro. Then he must have light everywhere. Lately, he has sent at these times for young men who have to keep him company during his hours. of manifest anguish. Ew. I don't even want to get okay. At times, his condition must have been dreadful. A man in the closest daily association with him gave me this account. Hitler wakes at night with convulsive shrieks. He shouts for help. He sits on the edge of his bed, unable to stir. He shakes with fear, making the whole bed vibrate. He muttered confused, totally unintelligible phrases. He gasped as if imagining himself to be suffocated. I knew it was reminding me of some Tupac shit. Okay. Hitler stayed swaying in his room, looking wildly about him. It was he, it was he. He's been here, he gasped. His lips were blue. Sweat streamed down his face. Suddenly, he began to reel off figures and odd words and broken phrases entirely devoid of sense. It sounded horrible. He used strangely constructed and entirely un-German word formations. Then he stood quite still, only his lips moving. He was massaged and offered something to drink. Then he suddenly burst out, "They're there in the corner. Who's that?" He stamped and shrieked in the familiar way. He was shown that there was nothing out of the ordinary in his room, and then he gradually grew calm. After that, he lay asleep for many hours, and then for some time things were endurable again. He was getting his ass. He was told him if he had access to drugs or not. Yeah, but it wasn't stated if he had any access to drugs or not, but it definitely sounds like a full blown psychosis, psychotic psychosis state where his mind broke and it was fractured before it was fully developed. All right, for him to be going through this instances, this full like sound like it was when he was in his full adulthood, when he had already set up shops and camps and things. You know what I'm saying? I'm really kind of interested in see what he a little bit more about his life. I don't know why. I don't know why. I've never thought that I would be. Oh my god. Yeah, constant persecution, right? Is what she was talking about earlier in the book. In infancy stage, right? The glances that we give our children, okay, plays a huge part in our adulthood. But um, he went a little bit further his father, right, by beating Adolf Hitler every day. And I'm sure he's not the only one in the world, okay? But consistently, all the time, where he was broken, right? Broken. I believe that the author is trying to get to. This is why maybe the Jews were persecuted because his his grandfather was unknown if he was a Jewish person or not, if it was a Jewish man. Now, quote me if I'm wrong. Somebody had probably already read biographies about um, Hitler and or his father. So let me know if I'm right or I'm wrong. If there was just some confusion surrounding his nationality or whatever they call it, Poland, German, or whatever, um, and what is leading us to why, you know, for foremost, the Jews were the ideal candidate to get rid, and everybody else, who didn't fit the description, especially if you were brown and black, you over there in Germany, you were in concentration camps. Okay, you were lucky if you were. And I do have research and papers in regards to many black people. Okay, even native people. Okay, even those who identified as gay, lesbian, and trans. They were all in that concentration camp, but the bulk were Jewish people. So I'm thinking that's what she's speculating. Why he persecuted the Jews so much is because his grandfather was like, nobody knew who the fuck he was. Okay, I don't know. Maybe it's not that simple. Okay, maybe it's not, but maybe it is. to the point where, he was getting daily beatings from his father, where his mental state broke, snap, because nobody was there to help him. His mother couldn't help. She would get beat too, so she stayed out of it. And it seemed what it was written in here that no matter what he did, he was going to get his ass beat. And that's what he did. I imagine it was from early on all the way up until his father passed away and died that he was getting beat. Anyway, I can't wait to read her other book. I did have it at the library and I think it went back. But since I have like 2 more weeks of class left, I'm forming other forms of bridges of thought to keep me occupied. You know what I'm saying? Because it's gonna be a couple seasons. I'm gonna be out, and it's like, girl, what you gonna do? You get so much vigorous and so much work and so much research done in a short period of time. When it's over, it's like you still want to continue that. Yeah, you might relax for a couple days, but it's like, okay, well, damn, what else? What's the next thing can I read? And what's the next thing, you know, I want to learn about? Anyway, we're going to come back here, finish up a little bit more with the father of Adolf Hitler, and then we're going to get into the mother of Adolf Hitler, and then we're just going to go from there and see what happens, y'all. Okay, 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 okay. Y'all should check this out. See if it's at your library, local library. If you like psychology, if you like the study of the mind. All right, y'all. I'm losing my voice, and this camera is messing up. I'll definitely see you guys in a couple hours. And I hope that you have a good morning. My name is Shawnee Janelle. This is Reality and Balance. I'm a certified holistic health practitioner who specializes in health and wellness from nutrition and beyond. All right, y'all. Enjoy the rest of these moments.